Back in 2008, I was just beginning university, figuring out how to navigate adulthood. Like most people my age, I didn't have much money to my name. My then-girlfriend, let's call her Emily, and our friend Mike were both in the same boat. We spent weeks hunting for an affordable place to live, scrolling through countless ads. Finally, something amazing popped up, a 2-bedroom apartment right in the city center. The location was perfect. Shops, restaurants, campus, everything we needed was a short walk away. The rent was suspiciously low for such a prime spot, so much so that it felt like we'd hit the jackpot. Turns out the apartment owner had fallen on hard times. The economy wasn't doing great, people were losing jobs left and right, and she was no exception. She had lost her job and decided to move abroad, hoping for a fresh start. Instead of dealing with managing the apartment from another country, she made us an offer. We could live there as long as we took care of the bills and maintenance. It felt like a sweet deal. It was almost as if we owned the place, but of course we didn't. We were just renters, albeit with a lot more control than usual. So there we were, me, Emily, Mike, and Mike's girlfriend, all crammed into this 2-bedroom apartment. It was tight, sure, but we made it work. Mike and his girlfriend took one room, while Emily and I had the other. We were just happy to have a roof over our heads, a place to crash after long days of studying or hanging out with friends. It didn't matter that we weren't technically the owners. To us, it felt like home. I was the one in charge of handling everything. Rent, bills, repairs, all of it was in my name. Over time, I started to think of it as my apartment. It didn't feel strange that I wasn't the actual owner. I was doing everything an owner would do. Fast forward a couple of years, and things started to change. Emily and I drifted apart and eventually broke up. No drama, just the natural course of things. Mike and his girlfriend decided to move out and get their own place, which left me with the entire apartment to myself. Going from living with 3 people to being alone in the middle of the city was an odd shift, but I quickly adapted. The rent was still dirt cheap for such a central location, so I figured why not stay? I had a full-time job now and could afford it on my own. The apartment was bigger than I needed, but I wasn't about to give it up when I knew I wouldn't find anything this good at that price. Living alone wasn't bad at all. I had friends over regularly, and the 2nd bedroom became a crash pad for anyone who didn't want to make the trek home after a night out. I didn't charge anyone. It was just nice having the company every now and then. Since I was in charge of everything, rent, repairs, bills, the apartment started to feel even more like mine. Funny enough, I stopped thinking of it as a rental altogether. The landlord and I had a solid understanding. She trusted me to take care of things, and in return, I paid her directly every month. It was all super informal, and it worked out great for both of us. By the time I was in my early 30s, I was still in that same 2-bedroom apartment, living solo but in a space that felt entirely mine. To everyone else, it seemed like I had my life together. Nice apartment, great location, stable job, and honestly, I felt pretty content. Sure, I didn't own the place, but it was home in every sense that mattered. And that's how life went for quite a while. The apartment became part of my identity. When people asked where I lived, I'd just say, my place in the city, and it didn't even cross my mind to clarify that it was a rental. In my head, it was mine. Then, in 2020, life threw a curveball when I met Sarah. She was smart, driven, and we hit it off instantly at a mutual friend's party. We talked for hours that night about everything: work, travel, life goals. It felt like we were on the same page about a lot of things. Sarah had her life mapped out. She had goals and a timeline, and that was refreshing. At the time, I was swept up in the excitement of a new relationship and didn't think too much about the future. We started dating seriously, and things progressed faster than I anticipated. Within a few months, Sarah was dropping hints about moving in together. I wasn't against the idea. The apartment was big enough for both of us, and I figured it would be nice to have someone around. What I didn't think to mention was that the apartment wasn't mine. It was still technically a rental. But it didn't seem relevant at the time. I'd been handling everything for so long that it just felt like my place. I didn't see the need to sit her down and explain the whole rental situation. So, Sarah moved in, and for a while everything was great. We had our little routines, made the place feel like ours, and life was good. But then Sarah started talking about the future marriage, buying a house, starting a family, and it felt like things were moving at lightning speed. We got engaged early in 2021, and even though it all happened quickly, I was in love. Or at least I thought I was. Looking back, I realize now that I was just going along with things, swept up in the excitement without stopping to think if I was really ready for all of it. By mid-2021, we were married, and that's when things slowly started to change. Sarah, who had once been so focused on our future, seemed to pull away. We argued more, usually over small things, but it was enough to build tension between us. By early 2022, it was clear that we weren't on the same page anymore. Conversations were strained, and we had more awkward silences than actual discussions. Eventually, we both realized that this wasn't working. After a particularly rough conversation, we agreed to divorce. There were no big fights, no drama, just the mutual understanding that we weren't right for each other. I figured it would be a smooth process. But, as you might have guessed, that's when things took an unexpected turn. Things seemed to be going well after Sarah and I decided to get divorced. We were both calm and reasonable about it. No big fights, no shouting matches, just two people realizing they weren't meant to be together. We were still living in the apartment for a little while as Sarah made plans to move out. I thought, okay, this is going smoother than expected. Little did I know that the calm was the quiet before the storm. One day, while I was at work, I got an email from Sarah. I figured it would be something about moving logistics or divorce paperwork, but when I opened it, I saw a real estate valuation report attached. For a solid minute, I just stared at the screen, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Why was there a valuation report on the apartment? Then it hit me. Sarah had gone behind my back and hired someone to evaluate the apartment's worth. The kicker. In the email, Sarah casually stated that she expected me to pay her half of the apartment's value once she moved out. I was floored. Half of the apartment's value. What value? This place was a rental. I sat there, dumbfounded, thinking maybe she misunderstood something. Maybe she thought I owned the apartment because I'd lived there for so long. So, I typed up a response, trying to keep my cool. Hey, Sarah, I wrote. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this, but the apartment is a rental. I've been paying rent directly to the owner for years. There's no value to split because I don't own it. I didn't ask you to get a real estate appraisal, and I can't afford to buy you out of something I don't own. I thought that would clear things up, but I was wrong. About 10 minutes after I hit send, my phone started buzzing. It was Sarah, and the second I picked up, she exploded. She was yelling about how I had lied to her, how I'd kept the fact that we were living in a rental a secret, and how she thought the apartment was ours the entire time. I tried to explain, but she was so angry that I couldn't even get a word in. She kept accusing me of deceiving her, saying she would have never moved in if she knew it was just a rental. I was honestly shocked by how furious she was. In my mind, I hadn't lied to her. The topic of ownership had never come up, and I didn't think it was relevant. I was managing everything, paying the rent, taking care of the place, handling all the bills. It felt like my place, so I hadn't thought to make it a big point of discussion. After a few more minutes of back and forth, with her accusing me of building a life on lies, I started to get frustrated. I told her, look, I didn't lie to you. You never asked if I owned the place, and it didn't seem like something that mattered. We were living here just fine. But that didn't calm her down. She was still furious, saying that I had let her believe we were building a future in an apartment we owned, only for her to find out it was a rental. She claimed everything was a lie, that our whole marriage had been based on falsehoods. It wasn't like that, though. I hadn't hidden anything from her. It just hadn't come up. Sarah then dropped another bomb. She demanded that I pay for the real estate appraisal she had ordered on the apartment. I remember the appraisal cost around $500. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone spends money without asking me and then expects me to foot the bill, that doesn't sit right with me. I told her, I didn't ask you to get an appraisal. You decided to do that on your own without even talking to me first. So, no, I'm not going to pay for it. That sent her over the edge. She started yelling even more, calling me names, saying I was selfish and that I had wasted her time. I just sat there, taking it all in, wondering how we'd gone from an amicable divorce to this level of chaos over something as simple as an apartment rental. She ended the call by calling me an A** hole and hanging up. I thought that might be the end of it, but of course I was wrong. The next thing I knew, Sarah was spreading her version of the story to all our mutual friends. She twisted the facts, making it sound like I had been lying to her for years, pretending to own an apartment I didn't, all to keep her happy. Our friend group started buzzing with messages. People were taking sides, some saying I was wrong for not being upfront about the rental, while others thought Sarah was overreacting. It felt like high school drama all over again, with everyone chiming in on something they didn't fully understand. Some friends reached out to me sympathizing, while others just stayed quiet, clearly unsure of where to stand in this ridiculous situation. One of our friends, let's call her Lily, tried to calm everyone down in our group chat. She said something like, "Maybe this is just a misunderstanding. Let's hear both sides before jumping to conclusions." But Sarah wasn't having any of it. She was too wrapped up in her anger to see reason. I decided to jump into the group chat to set the record straight. I explained calmly that I hadn't lied about anything. I'd been renting the place for years and hadn't thought it was a big deal because, in my head, it was my home. If Sarah had asked, I would have told her the truth. I wasn't trying to deceive her. For a moment, the chat went quiet, and I thought maybe people were starting to understand my side of things. But Sarah quickly fired back, accusing me of having every opportunity to tell her and choosing not to. She brought up how we'd talked about the future, about maybe renovating the place or starting a family, and how she had been under the impression that it was our apartment. She felt like I'd stolen her dream of building a life together in a home we owned. At this point, the group chat was blowing up again, with more people jumping in. It became this huge debate over whether I should have been clearer or whether Sarah should have asked more questions. Some people agreed with me, saying it wasn't a big deal, while others thought Sarah had every right to be upset. My best friend, Matt, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke up. His message made me laugh even though it probably wasn't the right time. He said, "Guys, who honestly asks, 'Hey, do we own this apartment?' On a first date? If you're living together, you're probably more focused on figuring out what to have for dinner, not whether you're renting or owning." That was Matt's sense of humor, always cutting through the BS with a dry remark. It felt like the first time someone wasn't taking the situation so seriously. But of course, Sarah didn't find it funny. She snapped back at Matt, saying, "It's not about the first date. It's about transparency in a marriage." At that point, I realized there was no winning this argument. The group chat was turning into chaos, with everyone talking over each other. Some were on my side, some were on Sarah's, and it was clear no one was going to agree on anything. One friend, let's call him James, kept trying to play both sides, saying, "Yeah, I get why Sarah's upset, but I don't think OP meant to lie." Eventually, I'd had enough. I sent one final message. "Look, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear about the apartment being a rental. It was never my intention to hide anything. I thought we were happy living here. And I didn't think it mattered because I've always treated it like our home. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, and I'm sorry if I did." Then, I muted the chat. I couldn't deal with it anymore. It had turned into a back and forth that wasn't going to end well for anyone. People had already picked their sides, and there was nothing else I could do to change that. Over the next few days, I got bits and pieces of updates from some friends. Apparently, the group chat kept buzzing with more arguments after I left. Some friends reached out to me privately, saying they understood where I was coming from, while others just stayed quiet. Sarah didn't speak to me directly after that, and honestly, it was probably for the best. I didn't see any point in dragging things out further. Looking back, I still don't think I did anything wrong. I get why Sarah was upset, but at the end of the day, it was just an apartment. It didn't define our relationship. At least not to me. But, of course, the drama didn't end there. A couple of days after the group chat drama, I thought things were finally settling down. I had apologized, explained my side of things, and decided to just move on. But of course, Sarah wasn't done with me yet. The apartment wasn't the last thing on her list. Next up was the car. I should have seen it coming. We were in the process of separating everything, and once you start talking about stuff, it usually spirals into who gets what. I didn't think we had that much to divide, but apparently I was wrong. It was the middle of the day, and out of nowhere, I got a text from Sarah. "I'm taking the car when I move out, and you know it." I just stared at my phone, like, what, the car? Sure, we both used it, but it wasn't as simple as her just taking it. Here's the thing, the car wasn't actually ours. It was a lease. I had signed the lease agreement, and while we both made payments on it, it still technically belonged to the bank. Sarah and I had both been using it, but now she was acting like she could just walk off with it as if it was her parting gift for putting up with me. I decided to be civil and text her back. Hey, you know the car's a lease, right? We don't own it. We still have payments left. I thought that would be enough to end the conversation. I mean, how do you argue with that? Facts are facts. But Sarah wasn't about to let it go. She shot back almost immediately. I don't care if it's a lease. I drive it the most. You barely use it, so it's basically mine. I'm taking it, and you'll figure out how to deal with the payments. That's when I realized things were going to get messy. Yeah, she did drive it more often than I did, but that didn't mean she could just claim it like some kind of prize. I mostly used public transportation, or walked, since I lived so close to everything. Meanwhile, Sarah relied on the car more for work and seeing friends, but it didn't change the fact that we were both responsible for the payments. I wasn't about to let her just walk off with the car without figuring out how we were going to handle the remaining payments, so I called her. The second she picked up, I could hear the frustration in her voice. She didn't even say hello, just went straight into, "You better not be calling to argue about the car." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Look, I'm not trying to argue. I just want to figure this out. The car is a lease, and we still have payments left. If you're taking it, are you planning on covering the rest of the lease? She let out an exasperated sigh, like I was the one being unreasonable. Why would I cover the whole lease? We got the car together. You should still pay your half even if I take it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, you're saying you want to take the car, but I should keep paying for something I won't even have access to? How does that make sense? She didn't hesitate for a second. It's your responsibility, too. We got it together, so you're still on the hook for the payments. At this point, I was starting to lose my patience. Sarah, come on. If you're taking the car, it's yours. I'm not going to keep making payments on something I don't even have. That's not fair. There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought maybe she was starting to see reason, but then she came back with, "Well, if you don't want to pay for the car, then I'll just give it back to the bank and let them deal with it." How about that? I couldn't believe it. She was basically threatening to dump the car and leave us both in a worse situation just to prove a point. That's not a solution, Sarah. If we give the car back, we'll both be hit with penalties for breaking the lease. You really want to do that just to avoid paying for it? There was another long pause, and I could tell she was thinking it over. Finally, she said, "Fine. What if we split the lease payments until it's up, and then I'll take it over completely?" I considered it for a second. It wasn't the worst idea, but I still didn't feel comfortable with it. What if she stopped making payments after taking it over? I'd still be tied to the lease, and if something went wrong, it would all fall on me. But at the same time, I didn't want to keep fighting about this forever. "All right," I said. "We'll split the payments for now, but once you move out, the car is officially yours. You take over the payments completely, and I'll sign off on it. That's the only way this is going to work." There was another pause, and I could hear her processing it. Finally, she agreed. "Fine, but you better stick to your word." After the call, I hung up feeling a mix of relief and frustration. I mean, we'd come to some sort of agreement, but it still felt like a lose-lose situation. I wasn't thrilled about splitting payments on a car I wasn't even using, but at least there was a plan to get out of it eventually. For the next few days, things went quiet. I didn't hear much from Sarah, and for once, the group chat wasn't blowing up with drama. It seemed like the car situation had been settled, at least for now. But knowing Sarah, I wasn't holding my breath. I figured it was only a matter of time before something else came up. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. Sarah found out about the Reddit post. I was just chilling at home, thinking things had finally calmed down, when my phone started ringing. It was Sarah, and I had a feeling this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. I picked up, and before I could even say, "Hello," she went off. "You need to delete that Reddit post right now," she snapped. "I can't believe you'd write about our divorce and make me look like the bad guy." I was caught off guard for a second. I hadn't mentioned her name or any specific details that could identify her, and I wasn't exactly dragging her through the mud. I was just sharing my side of things. But I knew trying to explain that to her wasn't going to work. "Why does it matter, Sarah?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. It's just a post, and no one knows it's you. I don't care if no one knows it's me, she shot back. You're making me sound like some sort of villain, and I'm not going to stand for that. Take it down, or I'll make your life even more difficult. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. At this point, what else could she do to make things more difficult? We were already arguing about the car, the apartment, and everything else under the sun. So I figured if she wanted to play this game, I could play too. Fine, I said. I'll delete the post if you agree to pay me back for your share of the rent while you were living with me. You know, since I was covering everything, bills, rent, while you were there. There was a pause, and I could practically hear her fuming through the phone. Are you serious? She said, her voice dripping with disbelief. You want me to pay you back for the rent when we were married? You are such an a-hole. Before I could even respond, she hung up. Just like that, the conversation was over. I sat there for a minute, trying to process what had just happened. Was I really the bad guy for asking her to chip in for the rent? I mean, we were both living there, but I was the one handling all the bills and rent. It didn't seem unreasonable to me, but apparently she thought otherwise. Yeah. She called me an A****hole and ended the conversation. I guess that means the post stays up. Honestly, I don't see what the big deal is. It's not like I'm lying or making stuff up. I'm just sharing what happened. If she's mad about it, well, that's not really my problem anymore. After the whole Reddit post fiasco, I figured Sarah would just simmer down. I wasn't expecting any more drama, at least for a little while. But of course, that was wishful thinking. A couple of days after our last heated phone call, I got another text from her, and this time she wasn't just angry. She was ready to go nuclear. I remember it clearly because I had just sat down to dinner when my phone buzzed. I opened it to find a long, ranting message from Sarah. I can't believe you're still making me look bad online, she wrote. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to have our personal life turned into entertainment for strangers? You're making me out to be some crazy person, and I won't let that slide. Now, I wasn't trying to turn anything into entertainment. I had posted anonymously on Reddit to vent and get some outside perspective. I wasn't expecting her to ever find it, and honestly, it hadn't even crossed my mind that anyone from our circle would stumble across it, but Sarah had, and she was livid. She went on in the text, accusing me of ruining her reputation, saying that she could no longer go out with friends without feeling like everyone was gossiping behind her back. It was ridiculous, really. Nobody knew we were the couple in the story, at least not unless she'd gone around telling everyone. But she was fixated on it, convinced that everyone in her life was judging her because of that one post. I knew trying to argue with her through text was pointless, so I just ignored the message. I wasn't in the mood to get into another back and forth. I had already made it clear that I wasn't going to delete the post unless she agreed to pay me back for her share of the rent, which clearly wasn't going to happen. So I let it go. A few days passed without any more texts from Sarah, and things seemed to calm down. But of course, in situations like this, calm is always temporary. Then, one evening, out of nowhere, I got a call from a mutual friend of ours, Jess. She's the type of person who's always trying to mediate, to keep the peace between everyone. I answered, and after the usual pleasantries, she got right to the point. Hey, she said, I'm just calling because I've been hearing some stuff from Sarah. She's really upset about the whole Reddit thing. I know you didn't mean to hurt her, but I was wondering if you'd consider taking it down. Just to keep the peace, you know? I sighed. I liked Jess, and I knew she was only trying to help. But this wasn't her battle to fight. Look, Jess, I said, I didn't name anyone. I didn't even mention where we lived. The only way Sarah found out was because someone must have told her or she went looking for it. I'm not taking it down. I'm not even saying anything that isn't true. Jess was quiet for a moment. I get that, she finally said. But Sarah feels like you've painted her in a bad light. She's really stressed about it. I just think it's worth considering, you know? I wasn't about to budge on this. I'd been accommodating up to this point, trying to keep things civil with Sarah, but this was getting out of hand. I'll think about it, I said, just to end the conversation without any hard feelings. But in my mind, I was done entertaining the idea. The post was staying up. Period. After that call, things actually did go quiet for a bit. Sarah stopped texting and the group chat cooled down. I started focusing on my life, trying to move past the whole mess, but just when I thought it was all behind me, something else came up. It was around a month later. I was at work, having a pretty normal day, when I got a call from my bank. They wanted to confirm a few details regarding a new car loan application. I immediately felt a pit in my stomach. I hadn't applied for a car loan. Can you repeat that? I asked the bank rep, hoping I had somehow misheard. The woman on the other end of the line repeated herself. We've received a car loan application in your name and just need to confirm some details. Yeah, I didn't apply for any car loan, I said, my voice a little shaky now. The rep paused for a second. Are you saying this wasn't you? Exactly, I replied. I have no idea what this is about. What followed was a whirlwind of confusion. Apparently Sarah had tried to get a new car in both our names, using my details without my consent. I was floored. Not only had she already planned to take the leased car, but now she was trying to secure a whole new one and stick me with half the responsibility. The bank rep was helpful, though. We quickly flagged the application as fraudulent, and they assured me they'd be investigating. After hanging up, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Was this some sort of revenge for the Reddit post? Or was she just trying to keep the financial entanglement between us going? I couldn't believe she had the nerve to pull something like that. But I knew one thing for sure: I had to confront her about it. So I shot her a message. Sarah, I just got a call from the bank. Did you try to apply for a car loan in my name? What the hell is going on? Her response was almost immediate. What are you talking about? I didn't do anything like that. At first I thought maybe she was telling the truth, but after I pressed her a bit more, she admitted to it, but with some weird excuse. She claimed it was a mistake and that she didn't realize the loan would be in both our names. She tried to make it sound like some kind of accident, but I wasn't buying it. I told her in no uncertain terms that this had gone way too far. I was done. If she tried anything like that again, I'd be getting a lawyer involved. That seemed to finally get through to her, and after a bit more back and forth, she promised to back off. But honestly, by that point, I didn't trust a word she said. After that mess, I decided it was time to lawyer up anyway. I'd hoped to avoid dragging things through the legal system, but Sarah clearly wasn't going to make this divorce simple. I found a lawyer and explained the whole situation, including the car loan stunt, the drama over the apartment, and everything else that had happened. The lawyer assured me that we could handle things legally and prevent Sarah from trying to pull any more tricks. I felt a huge sense of relief after that meeting, knowing that I had someone on my side who could help me put an end to this madness. As for Sarah, she eventually moved out, and we split the car lease like we'd agreed. But even after she was gone, the fallout from our relationship lingered. Our mutual friends had mostly moved on from the drama, but there were still some who took her side, believing her version of events. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. I was just glad to have the apartment to myself again, to have my life back to something resembling normalcy. The whole ordeal with Sarah had been a lesson in what can go wrong when two people aren't on the same page, and I was ready to put it all behind me. By the time everything was officially settled, I realized how much of myself I had lost in that relationship. I had spent so much time trying to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, that I hadn't noticed how toxic things had become. Now that it was all over, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But even though the legal stuff was done and Sarah was out of my life, one thing still lingered: the infamous Reddit post. And as fate would have it, that post would bring one last twist to this whole story. A couple of months had passed since Sarah moved out and the dust finally settled. I was relieved, to say the least. The apartment was quiet again, and I was back to my old routines: work, hanging out with friends, and just enjoying my space. The legal issues were wrapped up, the car lease was finally out of my life, and I'd even managed to reclaim some friendships that had been strained by the whole ordeal. Life was getting back to normal. But one thing still remained: the Reddit post. I hadn't thought much about it since everything had gone down. It was just a post, a way to vent during a really messy time. But then one evening I got a notification on my phone. Someone had commented on the post, and when I checked, it wasn't just one comment. The post had blown up, It had been shared on some popular threads, and suddenly there were hundreds of comments, people debating the situation, sharing their opinions, and even offering me advice. At first, I didn't know how to feel about it. I mean, part of me was embarrassed that something so personal had become public fodder for internet strangers. But the more I scrolled through the comments, the more I realized that people were actually supportive. Sure, there were a few trolls who thought I'd handled things poorly, but the majority of people were on my side. Some of the comments were genuinely funny. One person wrote, "Dude, you dodged a bullet with that one. If she's pulling this much drama over a rental, imagine how she'd act if you actually owned the place." Another person said, "Sarah is the type to demand alimony from a shared Netflix account." It was cathartic in a weird way, reading all these responses from strangers who got what I had gone through. It felt like validation, like maybe I wasn't the crazy one after all. I even responded to a few comments, clarifying some details, and people kept chiming in with support or sharing their own similar experiences. Then came the twist I didn't expect. I received a private message from someone with a simple subject line. "Hey, you okay?" I didn't recognize the username, but the message caught my eye. It was from a woman who had apparently been through something similar, a messy breakup that had spiraled into a dramatic legal battle. She shared a bit of her story and asked if I was doing all right now that things had cooled down. Her name was Lily. We messaged back and forth for a while, and I was struck by how easy it was to talk to her. She had been in a situation where her ex had tried to take her for everything during their breakup, and reading my post had made her feel less alone. It wasn't long before our conversations moved off Reddit and onto texting. Lily lived in the same city, and after a few weeks of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was a bit nervous. After everything that had happened with Sarah, I wasn't exactly in a rush to dive into another relationship, but this didn't feel like that. It felt natural. We met at a small cafe downtown, and within minutes of talking in person, I realized there was something different about Lily. She was understanding, laid back, and had this way of making me laugh that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Over the next few months, Lily and I got closer. We started seeing each other more often, and I slowly began to let go of all the bitterness and frustration I had been carrying from my time with Sarah. Lily had been through her own struggles, and we bonded over the shared experience of rebuilding after messy breakups. The funny thing is, she actually lived in a rental apartment too, just like mine. We joked about how our lives had taken these parallel paths, and it felt like we were both starting over in a way, with someone who understood all the craziness that had come before. One night, as we sat on her couch, watching a movie and eating takeout, she turned to me and said, "You know, you never really told me why you posted that story on Reddit in the first place." I laughed. "Honestly, I just needed to vent. I never thought anyone would actually read it. It was like therapy for me, I guess," she smiled. "Well, I'm glad you did. If you hadn't, I might not have reached out." That made me think. Maybe in a roundabout way, everything that had happened with Sarah, every argument, every blow-up, every moment of frustration had led me to this point. Sure, it had been messy, and at times I'd wondered if I was ever going to come out of it okay. But sitting there with Lily, I realized that maybe all of that had been worth it. Sarah eventually moved on too. We haven't spoken in a long time, and as far as I know, she's doing her own thing. The group chat drama died down. And while we lost some mutual friends along the way, I kept the ones that really mattered. The whole situation taught me a lot about myself and what I want out of a relationship. More importantly, it taught me what I don't want. Looking back, it's kind of wild how everything played out. From thinking I was going to have a peaceful divorce, to Sarah going behind my back with the real estate appraisal and the car drama, to her finding out about the Reddit post, and now meeting someone new because of it. Life has a funny way of working out, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. As for the Reddit post, it's still up. Every now and then I get a notification that someone's commented on it or shared it, and it reminds me of how far I've come since then. It's a weird piece of my past, but in a way, it's also what helped me move forward. And hey, if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that no matter how bad things get, there's always a way through. You just have to keep going, even when it feels like everything is falling apart around you. because you never know what might be waiting on the other side. So yeah, that's my story. It's been a ride, but I'm finally in a good place. And who knows? Maybe one day I'll write a new Reddit post about how everything turned out for the best. But for now, I'm just happy to be moving forward.